Riders Block is presented to you by Sandia Sportsbook, where sports fans go to drink, dine, watch, and win. All right, welcome back to another episode of Riders Block. I am your host, as always, Journal staff writer Sean Reider. Thrilled to be back in the studio, but no guest interview today. Unfortunately, just had some stuff kind of fall through with the short week and everything as well. So no guest. You're stuck with me today. Sorry about that. But obviously, it's just a huge, huge week for New Mexico football. Probably definitely the biggest game in years. You could make a good case that it's the biggest regular season game ever. I have talked to some people, and they're kind of pushing back against that a little bit. There were some pretty big ones in 1997 as well when they played for a WAC title and lost the WAC title game to Colorado State. But, of course, today we're going to talk a little bit just about kind of that game. Excuse me, not the WAC title game, but the game this week against San Diego State, Friday, 1:30 p.m. at University Stadium. Of course, that's league-leading San Diego State. Really has been kind of the best team overall in the Mountain West Conference. We'll talk a little bit about the Aztecs, some of the things I'm looking at there, and then kind of the implications for UNM in terms of the Mountain West Championship picture. Of course, I think I've talked about this on other shows. I think I've written about it a good deal at this point. This is not a win-and-in situation for New Mexico football. It is not a beat San Diego State and you're in the Mountain West Championship. It just has never. I thought there was a possibility it could get to that point, but it just has not gotten to that point. And this is still they still need things to break their way. And I do. If you're listening to this, you probably already know the scenarios, but I know they are a little confusing, especially for how the Mountain West kind of handles some head-to-head tiebreakers and all that as well. So I do want to run through these scenarios real quick. If UNM wins, I want to reiterate that again. These are the scenarios if UNM beats San Diego State. If they don't beat San Diego State, it's not a 0.0% chance. Then they're not completely knocked out of the Mountain West title game, but they would need so many more things to kind of break their way that, frankly, I'm not really interested in discussing it, and I don't think anybody in around UNM, around the program, is really expecting things to kind of. If they don't beat San Diego State, I don't think any of them are really expecting to kind of back into the Mountain West Championship game. I'll say that. So, without further ado, just want to run through these scenarios real quickly. The big games this weekend, obviously, are UNM and San Diego State, of course, and then Boise State at Utah State. Boise State is tied at 5-2 in the league standings with UNM, and then UNLV at Nevada, rivalry game there. And they are, of course, also 5-2. UNM does not have the head-to-head tiebreaker on Boise State, and obviously they lost in October. UNM does have the head-to-head tiebreaker on UNLV. Without further ado, the quick scenarios. If Boise State and UNLV both lose, that is the easiest scenario for UNM. That is the most fortunate scenario for UNM. UNM and SDSU, in that case, tied at 6-2 in the league standings, would play for the Mountain West title at University Stadium. Yes, UNM would host a Mountain West title game. As crazy as that sounds. They have they would have the hosting is determined by the head-to-head results, which they would have over SDSU in this case. This is a clear scenario that fans should root for. If UNM does take care of business on Friday, you're probably going to want to find a TV immediately after and catch the end of the Boise State game, and then you're probably going to watch that UNLV game on Saturday as well. Easiest scenario, the least complicated out of all of them, nothing to do with the computers, so that is the one I think fans should really kind of put their weight behind. But I don't know if it's the most likely. If Boise State wins, beating Utah State, and UNLV loses to Nevada, that would knock out UNLV to set up a three-way tie at 6-2, which the way the Mountain West does it is sorted out by a composite average of selected, predictive, and results-based metrics. What that basically means is they're going to look at things like Bill Connolly of ESPN's great S&P Plus rankings, SP Plus, not ANP, plus rankings, ESPN Strength of Record rankings, SOR, and then Factor Sports KPI rankings, and then Sports Source, their rankings as well. Bill Connolly's SP Plus and I believe Sports Source are the predictive metrics there, and then SOR and KPI, those are the results-based metrics. So you have a mix of those. What they would do is they would just add up where all the teams are in those standings and all that, and then they would just divide them by 4. I don't have access to Sports Source. You have to pay for that. I have been on the fence about getting it. It's not terribly expensive, but I just haven't quite gotten to it. Everything else you can look up on your own, Bill Connolly, you can find very easily. ESPN SOR, you can find very easily. KPI, which is through Factor Sports, you can find very easily as well. In this situation, if Boise State wins and UNLV loses, unfortunately for UNM, still, even though UNM would beat SDSU and all that, the way things kind of stand right now with these rankings, which are subject to change for sure, although I don't think they're subject, particularly with the predictive metrics, to drastic change pending a result. Boise and SDSU are listed ahead of UNM in 2 of the 3 metrics I've been able to see. I think it would most likely, this scenario, result in a San Diego State-Boise State championship in San Diego. So that is the one scenario where UNM could win. That is one of these scenarios where UNM can win and get left out of the Mountain West championship game. It's a little, without getting too much in the rankings, they changed the rankings, the metrics they used last year. They used to do more traditional BCS kind of rankings, like the Colley Matrix, which you've probably heard of if you've really followed college football for a long time. Anderson and Hester, the Massey ratings, the Wolf ratings, those were the ones they used. And in what could be, we'll see what happens, kind of an unfortunate twist for UNM, they don't use those anymore. And I was looking at them Sunday. 3 of those 4 all have kind of New Mexico as the second team in the league behind San Diego State. So it would be more fortunate if UNM was, more fortunate for UNM if they were, the Mountain West was still using those ratings, but they just don't at this point. So I figured it would be at least worth a note, but I don't think it's something we need to kind of think about as much. Now, next scenario, if Boise State loses and UNLV wins, that would set up a 3-way tie at 6-2 between UNM, San Diego State, and UNLV. UNM would host because they are 2-0. They would be 2-0 against San Diego State and UNLV. So then the opponent would go to the whoever UNM plays would go to the metrics. That would most likely be SDSU again in a basically just a rematch of the regular season finale there. So that is also a preferable situation there for UNM. If Boise State and UNLV both win, which I think is very much on the table, then that sets up a 4-way tie at 6-2, and it's going to go to the computers completely. The average, the composite averages of all the ratings and stuff like that. Based on what I've seen, that most likely will result in a San Diego State UNLV title game in San Diego at Snapdragon Stadium. I think that's probably the cruelest one for kind of UNM fans in a lot of respects because in this scenario, of course, UNM would have beaten the 2 teams that played in the Mountain West title game, and they would have had the same league record, and it really wouldn't have mattered. And I do think that would certainly be kind of the most acrimonious situation for fans, and maybe a weird one for the league. I would be curious what the kind of, if there would be any notable kind of public outcry, or if, frankly, if people kind of cared enough. So I do think that would be a bit of a bummer for UNM fans and the team. But as Jason and I kind of talked about yesterday, he thinks getting to 6-2 and finishing 9-3. If the chips don't fall their way, even if they finish with those records, that's a pretty remarkable achievement as well. I will reiterate again, I'm not going to delve into the kind of scenarios where if UNM finishes 5-3 because there's kind of a log jam there, kind of like in the second and third place in the standings, and I don't know how. I don't have a good feel for how things could kind of play out on that end. But as you can kind of figure out, the most preferable items for UNM are beat San Diego State, have Boise State lose, and then kind of a distant kind of third, UNLV losing to Nevada. But really, I mean, they need Boise State to lose to Utah State. If you are a UNM fan, you should be pulling. I know it's weird, obviously, because Broncos there, but pulling pretty hard for Utah State this Friday. It's going to be an interesting situation because that game is set to end right around the time, maybe a little bit after UNM wraps up its game against San Diego State. So there's a world where it might not matter as much if UNM does not beat San Diego State. But, we were told the other day is that the post-game press conference after the UNM SDSU game will be delayed until the end of that Boise State game, because as long as that result isn't kind of final, we might be just asking Jason Eck about things he doesn't quite know about. So I think that'll be an interesting situation. I will be tuning in that game immediately after the SDSU game as well. Now to the actual game. This is a big one, and this is a really interesting one. I think it's kind of funny that UNM started the year playing Michigan at the Big House, and now they're kind of finishing against San Diego State. which Eck likened yesterday to a 1998 Big Ten team, and Eck is quite familiar with late 90s Big Ten teams because he played and coached, worked as a GA around a lot of them. This is, if you know about Sean Lewis, who's San Diego State's head coach, you know that he's kind of built a lot of his reputation on kind of up-tempo, all-out offense, going as fast as they possibly can, have good rush attacks, but also hit, explosives, in the passing game and all that as well. I've had some really dynamic players, previously at Kent State, which I think is one of the better coaching jobs pretty much anybody has done, in my opinion, in the last kind of 15 years. Really got them back to legitimate relevancy. And it was always kind of a thought of, what if you take, what if you put Sean Lewis in a spot where they do have some legitimate resources and kind of let him cook a little bit. And you're kind of seeing that this year with San Diego State. He's finally in a position where he has some good resources. He's got a nice recruiting base around him in San Diego and Southern California. And he is kind of reaping the benefits of that right now, of course, at 9-2 overall and on the cusp of playing for a Mountain West championship. If San Diego State wins, by the way, they clinch for the Mountain West title game. They will be in there. The one weird thing that's a little odd is that they might not be able to play their actual Mountain West title game at Snapdragon Stadium. They might have to play it at Petco Park because there's like an MLS Cup game or whatever at Snapdragon Stadium scheduled for that same night. So not really relevant, but something I was looking at earlier today. But talking about kind of Lewis's background and that kind of at Kent State, they call it like the flash fast offense, and that was the branding they used for it. Last year, they kind of called it the Aztec fast offense, and it just never really took off. They finished 3-9. They had Danny O'Neal, who's now at Wisconsin after transferring this, I believe, this spring. It never really took off. It wasn't a super talented roster. There were some good guys there. Trey White obviously was a guy that had a pretty nice season. Chris Johnson, who we'll get to in a little bit, did some okay things. Lucky Sutton was on the roster, but he wasn't the lead back at that point. There were some guys in place, but it just wasn't anything close to what you're seeing now. The offense never really took off. I think Lewis got a fair amount of criticism for it. And this year, it's kind of been night and day. Early in the season, they had a little more of that quality, but really, they've kind of shifted to far more of a ball control offense. They run the heck out of the ball. Lucky Sutton, their lead back, is the only 1,000-plus yard rusher in the Mountain West. He's a big back. I think he's like 6'1" or 6'2". Big dude, and that really shows in the tape. Very physical. Eck made a point to say that, he will have some kind of 3rd and 2s or whatever where you have to get hats to him because he's a guy that, even if the run isn't blocked great, he's a guy that can get, surge ahead and kind of fall forward and make things happen there. So they're really, really physical. They're really big. They're really athletic in a lot of respects. That's something that Eck kind of talked about yesterday too. And the matchups I'm kind of looking at that in mind, and I'll add this too. I think they're like bottom 10 in the country. I'm pretty sure. I think they only pass. Excuse me. I think they run like 65% of the time. So they have obviously they run the football significantly more. That game can obviously travel and work in a lot of different scenarios. You saw that in the poor weather when they beat Boise State a couple weeks back and all that as well. So they do have a good run game they can lean on. They have a very good defense that I thought was interesting how Eck kind of talked about it, that they're not super glitzy. They're not super fancy with how they kind of handle things. They just play really, really sound. And when you talk to kind of players, talked to Jack Lane about this yesterday, that is that really shows up on tape. It's not kind of quite like the Michigan defense where you could see any blitz package and they could empty the kitchen sink on guys and everything like that. They just kind of play simple, sound defense, and they have the players to do that, and it's really worked well on that end. But the matchups I'm looking at for this week's games, for this week's game, UNM's receivers against San Diego State corners, I think is really, really interesting. I think you could say that this is kind of at least with like pure receivers, I think you could say that this is kind of a San Diego State strength on a UNM weakness at this point in the season. I do have questions. Can a guy like Keegan Johnson get meaningful, consistent separation on a guy like Chris Johnson, who I think is honestly has a really good case to be one of the Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year? He's been fabulous. He's a guy that's going to get some nice NFL looks. He's not super fast, but again, like a lot of the guys on this San Diego State roster, he's really big. He does a lot of nice things. Or Bryce Phillips, the guy playing around him, or if Dwayne McDougal, who played for Eck at Idaho, right? He's kind of their starting 3 safety. If Can these receivers get separation on guys like that in a meaningful, consistent way? I think a guy like Keegan Johnson can make it happen against Phillips. I don't know about a Johnson, frankly, and I think Keegan is a good player, but I think there is a real challenge there, and I'm curious to see how UNM finds ways to maybe scheme things open. I said before the Michigan game that I thought Dorian Thomas could be a guy that is in line to kind of have a big game. I think he's one of the few guys probably the only guy that UNM had that kind of presented a mismatch for Michigan. I think that's still the case with the way that San Diego State plays. And, even though they have all these athletic big dudes on defense, I think Thomas is still a bit of a mismatch. I'm curious to see how much of a point they make it to get him to get him the ball. I'm curious to see how San Diego State plays him. We've had questions over the past couple weeks about why isn't Dorian Thomas kind of getting the ball as much as he used to. I think a lot of that, frankly, is just because of the fact that other defenses have been giving him more attention. You saw that notably in the Utah State game where Cade Keefe really took off. Big part of that, and all credit to Cade Keefe for making the plays, but was that Dorian Thomas was getting a lot of attention from that Utah State defense, and they didn't want him to. They didn't want Thomas to beat them. So I think this could be an interesting game for Dorian Thomas to kind of pop off and do some nice things as well. And I think UNM has to find a way to generate. I think if they generate like 4 or 5 explosives in the passing game, I think that would honestly look like a pretty good day. If you can maybe make that happen, I think that would honestly be pretty big. I'm not expecting more than like 5 explosives, just the way with the San Diego State defense is playing. I've been wrong on a lot of predictions this year in terms of how games played off, so I don't know. Maybe they really find ways to scheme and get guys open, because San Diego State does play predominantly zone. So I'm curious to see if they find ways, they have any plans to kind of, find ways to hit in between those zones, but we will see. But that is something I'm really interested in because I think UNM will find ways to run the ball effectively run the ball effectively and consistently and kind of move the chains a bit more. But I don't think they can win this game with a fully one-sided offensive attack. I think San Diego State probably has a bit more of an edge there. I think they could find a way to win the game with a more one-sided run game based attack. And that kind of leads me to my other matchup I'm really interested in. UNM's defensive line against San Diego. I keep trying to say South Dakota State. It's San Diego State. Their offensive line. This is a huge offensive line. I think this is maybe like with Michigan and maybe UCLA. I haven't looked back on UCLA in a minute, frankly, but this is a big offensive line. Their left tackle, Christian Jones, is like 6'9". Their right tackle is like 6'8", and they got big dudes in the middle too. UNM's defensive line does not have, with the exception of maybe like a Brian Booker, and Jalen McIver's a bigger dude too, but Booker's the one guy that kind of stands out because of his size. I mean, his hands are big, his frame is huge and all that as well. I think, they don't really have like a lot of huge dudes, and that's something that's kind of been a 10 of the defense. They like to, it's why they move like guys like, Gabe Lopez and Okiki Oloronfunmi inside to the middle after they were previously edge rushers here, is because they want a guy like really athletic, a little twitchier guys that could kind of out-athlete, the guards and centers in the middle and all that as well. They like that matchup, and I think that's worked well this season. I'm curious to see how that holds up against San Diego State's offensive line, because San Diego State, in terms of pass pro, has done a pretty nice job. They've only given up 13 sacks throughout the season, which is tied, I believe, with San Jose State for the least in the Mountain West Conference. Can UNM find ways to reliably generate pressure there? Can they figure that a little bit more? And then does UNM have the bodies to kind of plug in this run game? And I don't think UNM will get completely worn out because of the way they've been able to kind of rotate and sub on the defensive line throughout the season. That is something that guys who have been on this defensive line prior to the season were really excited about, and you're seeing that. I think more guys are more productive. So I think they do have. I think they have enough bodies to not get totally worn down, but I don't know if they have the kind of stuff up front to really kind of meet a lot of those guys and hold on gaps and stuff like that too. So big offensive line, very physical offensive line, and I think it's going to be a big challenge among a lot of other challenges in this game. So that's something I'm really, really interested to see. I think UNM has found awesome ways to kind of manufacture pressure, and I think they've done really good stuff in terms of like helping fit the run too with the with linebackers like Mercury Swaim and Jack Sneck, kind of leading the way there too. We saw it the last couple weeks against Colorado State and Air Force, but can they do it against really probably the most imposing team in the league? That's kind of a question that I have and something I'm going to be really kind of eagerly looking to see. Kind of the third and final matchup. We could get into a lot of different things too, but I'll kind of keep it simple like this. San Diego State quarterback Jaden Denegal going up against UNM quarterback Jack Lane. Obviously, they're not like playing against each other. Which quarterback can have a cleaner game? Lane has played some pretty clean games lately. Denegal has played some pretty clean games lately. I think I like Lane's recent run a bit more in the sense that he has found ways to be more efficient and found ways to create explosives and stuff like that. I think Lane still has been making really good decisions as of late, even if he doesn't have stat lines that are kind of blowing your mind. That's fine. It's working really well, and UNM has had the run game to kind of complement him in the defensive performances to make that happen as well. Denegal has kind of been in a similar mode as well too, although I don't want to say they've quite taken the ball out of his hands, but he is not getting kind of some of the opportunities he's had in the past. Eck was kind of wise to note yesterday that Denegal has had some kind of tricky drops this season. He throws really hard. Denegal was a guy that was previously at Michigan. He was a pretty highly rated recruit and all that as well. So he's got the arm strength. He's got that in spades. But does he kind of does he kind of have the touch to make sure that guys get it there? And the receivers, I think for San Diego State with Jordan Napier kind of going down. He was listed as out for the full game. On the last availability report that San Diego State put out. I'm assuming he's going to be out this week. If he doesn't, that might change how I'm kind of viewing at the game, because Napier to me has kind of been their best, outside of Sutton, their best offensive playmaker. But I don't know if UNM should be so terribly worried about San Diego State's receivers at this point. If Napier comes back, might be a different deal. But yeah, I think whatever quarterback can make better decisions over the course of the game and not turn the ball over, whether it be interceptions or fumbles and stuff like that, I think that's going to be a pretty big deal. Like I kind of said, San Diego State does not have the craziest blitz packages that you'll ever see in your life. They don't empty the kitchen sink. But they do have guys, particularly Trey White, that can, bring pressure and make things happen there. So curious to see how Lane holds up against it. I'm curious to see if guys like Keyshawn James Newby can step up, and Darren Agu and Brett Carhu, whose motor has been just awesome the last couple weeks, can really step up and make a real run at a lot of these guys and at Denegal and put some pressure on them. But beyond that, I think a lot of the keys to the game are kind of simple, right? It is a little bit of I'm not expecting a shootout or anything like that. The total is pretty low, 41.5 points last I checked. So I think that is a total kind of befitting of a 1998 Big Ten game, and I think it will have a similar rhythm to something you might have seen back then, or something you might have seen out of the old Big Ten West. Kind of a classic Iowa, Minnesota, or Iowa, Wisconsin kind of deal and stuff like that. I think, both teams are more similar than not, although I do think there's some couple key differences. And I think it's going to come down to, just kind of the physicality and what team can get more out of the rushing game, what team can maybe get one big explosive out of the rushing game, and what team kind of turns it over less. And, if either team can get a special team score, I think that'll go a really, really long way. I would favor UNM in that edge. I think their special teams have been a lot better than maybe some, some of the ratings that have come out, whether for PFF or K-Ford and all that. I don't think UNM is the best special teams team in the country, but I do think they're better than like 67th, which I saw was like in the K-Ford ratings. I think they're pretty clearly a top 40 team at the very least in terms of what they've been able to do there. And I'm also curious as well, just to kind of throw this out there, what the who's getting the opportunities in the run game in this game, right? Because Scott Trey Humphrey has shown that he can be a very effective rusher when UNM kind of shifts to more of a physical gap scheme kind of game, and then Damon Bankston is a little bit more of kind of like a zone guy, when they hit that mid zone game and everything as well. And I think this game probably lends itself more to kind of physical charging gap scheme, runs and everything like that too. But if UNM finds ways to get the mid zone going, then that would be pretty huge in a lot of respects as well. So huge game. Very excited to cover it. It's the biggest game that I've covered in my time on the beat. So Really excited for fans to have this opportunity to really have something that it seems like it could be just a really memorable game in a lot of respects. Maybe a turning point if UNM wins it, and even if they don't, 8-4 is still a pretty amazing season, and it really shows how far the program has gone. Even though third coach in 3 years, the program has just kind of gotten better and better every single year, and obviously it's really kind of hit its stride this year. So huge game. Very excited to cover it once again, and I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast today. Sorry we didn't have the normal guests as usual, but that was kind of just want to put my thoughts out there on kind of the playoff scenario. The Mountain West Championship scenarios, and then I'm kind of looking at the game. But thanks for listening as always.